80% of African Americans vote Democrat. What can Republicans, or you think from your experience, do to break that? Because right now they may feel like they don't have representation for Republican leadership. What issues do you think we can do as Republicans to make that difference?
Well, some of the best effort I think that's being done to help bring in African American voters into my party is being done by people who are African American, who've been elected to Congress, elected to other positions across the country. The heart of our party is saying, how do we get our economy going so strong that we can get more people out of poverty and middle-income people with higher incomes? That's what it's all about. I wasn't as successful as I'd like to be in communicating that message, but it's something we have to be able to do and push back against the Democrats who always try to misrepresent what we in our party stand for. The only reason we run for office is to help people get out of poverty, to help middle-income families do better, keep people safe and well. That's what it's all about.
Here we have what we'll call black hand, white hand. Little tapping out in the sun.
I got rid of the Democrat Party and kept the Conservative Party. The main reason is there weren't a whole lot of people like me left in the Democratic Party. The number of conservative Democrats still exists in terms of voters. You find conservative Democrats walking around Georgia, but they're not in office. The number of elected conservative Democrats is almost non-existent right now. They've kind of all been defeated or run out of the party. I happen to believe, though I know this would shock some people who may listen to this interview, I happen to believe that there's more of a debate going on in the Republican Party than in the Democratic Party on almost every issue under the sun. If you're a Democrat, you're expected to think a certain way on every single question, and if you don't, you're thought to not be a true Democrat.
It's easy for the other side to demonize you, and if you let them define you, then so be it. You allowed that to happen. I never allowed that to define me. And I tell you what's interesting. I've heard other blacks say that, oh yeah, you're called an Uncle Tom. And I was telling my friend Sheila, who's here tonight, that if people call me an Uncle Tom, they don't do it to my face. Because when you are a strong believer in your principles and your philosophy, I think people don't want to mess with you. They may say it behind your back, but I believe it the way black Democrats believe in big intrusive government and the passion they have for what I call a failed agenda. I am just as passionate about less regulations, lower taxes, as they are about what I call a failed agenda on the left.
I was a Democrat most of my life. I switched parties in 2010 to become a Republican. Did not change any of my values, but I did begin to understand that my beliefs were antithetical to the liberal cause. And so I chose to be a Republican because it was more in line with what I thought was good for this country, which is free enterprise, market-based solutions. And I'm a United Methodist, and I just have personal faith in issues that I believe in. And I think that the Democratic Party had become too hostile to my faith.
There's nothing that can kick a political movement in the rear end like a major political loss that was unexpected. And that's what happened with Romney's loss to President Obama in 2012. That really was a kick in the rear end, a wake-up call, so to speak, for the conservative movement. If we don't get businesses involved, if we don't get minorities involved, if we don't get young people involved, we're going to start losing ground at an even faster rate than before. So, strange as it might seem, maybe what happened in the general election of 2012 in the long term may work out good for the conservative movement.
The problem with the conservative ideology is that they're speaking to like people. To be able to bring people in, like the gentleman we met the other day, Tyrell, a young free thinker. He was raised in the mechanism. There's nobody closer to the Democratic mechanics, machinery than him. But now he's went and got an education. He's understands business, and he's thinking. I think that really, and I had a long discussion with him.
Being a young African-American male growing up in the era of hip-hop, growing up in the era of AIDS and crime, things that we've seen since my first president of my memory was Ronald Reagan. So I saw him in 1980. I was born in 77. So I've seen a lot of things that seem to place young African-American men in a negative light. And I fought my entire life to be educated. I enjoyed my talent when I was rapped and did a lot of hip-hop, toured with most of all the hip-hop stars you can think of.
Republicans just have more confidence in people. Being a black conservative, I have more confidence in what I believe the black community is capable of.
Enjoyed my talent when I was rapped and did a lot of hip-hop, toured with most of all the hip-hop stars you can think of. Still keep in contact with a lot of these guys, and we oftentimes feel as though we just don't have a platform. You know, a lot of the African-American leaders, they may be elder statesmen and may not understand who we are as people, how modern we are, how we focus more on entrepreneurship as opposed to civil rights, because there may be a generational gap. Someone may not have stepped down to that new generation to teach the civil rights in the right way to them, so we just focus on money. And then what you see from that is we get it however we can. And that's the barrier I'd like to try to break.
Conservatism in 2020 can't be the same thing it was in 1985, because nothing else is the same as it was in 1985. Conservatives have to make clear that we have policies and a philosophy that will deal with the present day challenges. I didn't become a Republican because I thought, oh, I don't want to help anybody, so let me join the party that doesn't want to help anybody.
Well, I think there's misconceptions all over the country. You know, the left tries to portray strong voter ID laws, states that are passing voter ID laws and taking other measures to secure our elections process. And they basically play that it's trying to disenfranchise people, and really the opposite is true. When you look at Georgia, we've had our photo ID law in place since 2007. You know, we've had literally millions of people that have voted in several different election cycles. And when you look at the numbers comparing the presidential race before photo ID to after photo ID, minority participation has gone up just exponentially. I think a lot of people try to take minorities and just say they don't have photo IDs, and that's just ridiculous. You know, these are smart, intelligent people. They're business owners, they're school teachers, they're athletes, they're hardworking folks. So to say that they wouldn't have a photo ID to vote in an election is ridiculous.
Republicans just have more confidence in people. Being a black conservative, I have more confidence in what I believe the black community is capable of. I believe that free market solutions can help our businesses thrive, and they will employ people in our community when they thrive. And I think that confidence makes me look more closely to market-based solutions instead of looking at people as being weak and in need of that sort of assistance from government. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's just about confidence. What do you believe? Do you believe in people, or you believe in bureaucrats?
Are individuals racist? Absolutely. I'm sure there are racist Democrats, there are racist Republicans, there are racist independents. It's called people. It's about philosophy. See, that means more to me than anything, because when you get into who's racist, who's not, it's called people.
And I said it like this: when I was campaigning for labor commissioner, I refused to allow race into the discussion, simply because I told potential voters, vote for me because I'm qualified. Don't vote for me because I'm black. And I think that's where we make the biggest mistake. I've been to the white, the colored. I live that. But I refuse to allow that to become a part of me, because I pray daily to my God. I forgive those who did that. We cannot move forward if we continue to look back. America is better than this, from what I see. America should be to the point where I can criticize my president and not be called a racist. I criticize him every day. Look at me. We have to move beyond that, and the only way we can do it is refer back to what Martin Luther King said: content, character over pigmentation.
And character is largely determined and controlled by culture. And so culture is the thing that eats strategy, eats ideas, eats who we are, and eats it for breakfast. Culture is the rule. Cultures that are nihilistic, that are falling apart, that are self-destructive, and then you're seeing in America culture that says, let's hold on to the exceptionalism that was America, that is related to the culture that our founding fathers envisioned, that is related to culture that comes from Judeo-Christian principles. That kind of culture has had some benefit, but there is culture that is anti those things. And that will be less black and white or red and yellow. That will be more about differences in ideology.
Humans live in the senses, right? We can take it spiritual, we can take it physiological. We live in the senses.
I agree that many of the problems that we have stem from incomplete family composition.
Humans live in the senses, right? We can take it spiritual, we can take it physiological. We live in the senses. So we say, here we have what we'll call black hand, white hand. Little tamping out in the sun. Now, we're going to slowly turn that over, Melvin. Turn it over with me. Raise it up. Not much difference, is it? Okay, so it's all in the fine print, right? So we turn it over, Melvin, take a look. So now we see it's only skin deep. We have three-legged stool. And the three-legged stool is religion, ethnicity, and traditions. Yes, race is and will continue to get better in America. And some would say, well, I don't see it. The fact of the matter is, you're seeing it right here. Ladies and gentlemen, how many in here would say that the Palestinians and the Israelis, what would you say they are? Different ethnicities?
No.
No or yes?
No.
No? Both are Semites, separated by traditions and religion, but both at each other's throats. Not because of ethnicity, because they are the same. Because of religion and tradition.
I agree that many of the problems that we have stem from, I want to say, incomplete family composition. I think it is absolutely necessary that both parents be in a household. That's the way God set it up. Because we each play our role. You know, you as the male, you set the example as the provider. You make sure that the rules are followed. And I, as the female, am the nurturer. So I kind of lick the wounds and do the encouragement, maybe a little more than you. Not to say that you don't do it, but you are the head and I'm the neck. And when the head is missing, the neck has to grow a head.
But I have directly been called names. And, you know, I grew up with conservative parents. They were Democrats. But in education, or when I would get involved in community activities, they were liberals. And so this when I was a kid, young, and I was just listening to what they were saying about this rhetoric and all this liberal ideology. And then I said, so they are for the little guy. They're for the poor people.
Who is they?
The Democrats, the liberals who try to educate us. No offense, Sheila. But so I said, okay, these liberals are saying they're for, which I have nothing against the part of liberal ideology that says you should be compassionate, look out for the poor. I believe in that as well. And the liberals say you should be open-minded and be tolerant and accept different ideologies. So I did what they taught me. I chose to be a Republican. So that's my ideology. So you think the liberals will respect me, right?
It's a choice.
So I did that. So I decided to go and work down at the Georgia State Capitol as a Republican legislative aide. This person is now deceased. I won't name the person, but I was working for this state rep, and I was called a house the N-word. And one day I went to a debate down at CNN, and it was during the presidential election. I think, Teresa, you were there. Ken, you might have been there.
I was
one of our former ambassadors from Atlanta. We were all, after the debate was over, there was some students from Morehouse College there. And I think they might have been Republicans, I don't know. And I was called by this ambassador, you are an N and you always will be an N. So racism is not just on one party.
The reaction we always have is somebody is doing something to us. My grandmother, my parents, it's like the Ku Klux Klan. My aunt said, the Klan used to march down our street. I said, I didn't believe that, Aunt Brenda. I said, really? So one day I looked at the census. They lived in Barber County, Alabama. That's the same county that George Wallace came from. And I looked at the census, and they were the only black family on that street. I said, that's odd. So maybe she was right. The story was that Grandma would when the Klan would march down the street, they were all told to go back in the room, turn the lights out. Grandma got her shotgun, sat out on the porch until that march was over. And they just went by peacefully. So we know how to balance. We would not be here today if we didn't know how to balance things. I'm not saying that's a solution. My point, though, is that how to balance this whole fine line between safety, security, and dealing with people's fears doesn't always have to end up like what happened in Ferguson.
Ferguson is a window into the relationship between African Americans and the police. Nothing more than what you've been seeing burned into our psyche since the 1950s. Some of the earliest images from television between police and African Americans have always been contentious. We can go back as soon as television was available to the American people. What were some of the first images you saw? The interaction between police and African Americans. It was never friendly. It didn't begin friendly, and it's not friendly now.
That slave mentality is embedded.
And the media most times like to think of the negative. We have plenty of positive interactions between police and blacks every day.
Right.
But when you get this instance, you're going to get an overhype and oversensitivity to it. So what you have to look at is African American men, 18 to 24, the way they see police, in particular white police, us, we ride down the street, may not have an issue with it. An 18-year-old who has been taught, look at what they do to you. This is all. They don't know anything more. They have not had any positive interactions with the police in their life.
They don't have that positive image of law enforcement because of what they see
every day
projected on television every single day. You can turn on any news station in Atlanta and in America. The first 10 minutes is dedicated to crime and police officers.
And 50% of those stories are African American men being arrested.
And that's embedded in their minds. But we have to rise above that, and we can't use that with a broad paintbrush to say all law enforcement officials are like this. Exactly. But unfortunately, when you see this 24/7, 365, that's embedded in a very impressionable mind. We must do a much better job of communication between the entities, the communities and the police department. Get into those communities, learn about that neighborhood, talk to them when you don't receive that 911 call.
So you asked me the question about outreach. What do we really mean by outreach? I became a Republican because those ideas, the way I was brought up, those ideas were relevant. That philosophy fits what I believe in. So no one reached out to me. Our party has got to get the communication message together. So that people will feel good about listening. Our kids are still in failing schools. We still live in poor, blighted neighborhoods. And there are people going to Congress every day saying that they're representing us. If that's the best you can do, then, Eric, we are in trouble. There is a role for government, but that role must be very clearly defined. Because when people are hurting, guess what? You do need assistance. I understand that. And that's what we do in this country. But it must not be something that keeps you in a bind all the time.
You're talking about a gang. That's a gang. Those folks that he works with, they're gangs in suits.
Uh-oh.
He has not been able to do anything without some kind of repercussion or fight from these folks. Nothing.
But when you say folks, Jean,
I'm talking about Congress.
Okay, here's
I'm talking about Congress. The things that they have said, the pictures, the things that they have said about this man, you could never get away with and say about Bush without going to jail.
We simply have to look at this. If you're going to run for president of the United States, it's a high stakes game. Every president has been made fun of. Their jokes, their Halloween mask of every president, but you can't do this with this president. When we talk about rights and the opportunity, I don't want you just simply because I am the first black president to be treated differently. Secondly, when you talk about passing or trying to get legislation done, the White House can send over their budget, but Congress sets the budget. If you want something done, Jean, on Capitol Hill for the people of this country, you must then reach out and work. It's called compromise, and sometimes we don't like it in politics, even as a conservative. But the one thing I do understand is that Congress holds the purse string, and a president can do executive orders, but they can only go but so far, because the next president comes in, wipe him right out.
The problem is that he's in such a negative environment that it's probably very difficult. I mean, this man is living under a scrutiny that we don't know nothing about. Yeah.
But guess what, Sheila?
He's not a centrist. He's not even a centrist Democrat. Neither is he a classical liberal.
Let's get educated with this discussion. This is where we need to go.